DC's Crisis events are some of their most prolific and iconic stories. Particularly, the first event, Crisis on Infinite Earths, is one of the most beloved events in all of comic book history. While it's had many sequels over the years, I still feel that Infinite Crisis is probably the best out of those, though I'm not sure if I would say I'd put it exactly up there with the original. As an event, Infinite Crisis is pretty clear in its thematic intent and message, but even still, there is a bit of debate over certain things and how valid some of the themes are for the characters they are applied to, as well as some people that claim that the story is contradictory to its own premise. I'll go over a few of these things because even though Infinite Crisis is generally believed to be a very good event by pretty much all fans, there are some people that I have seen have big problems with them, and some of them are valid, but I do think for the most part, this event is a lot more great than it is bad. So, let's get into this. The most obvious and overarching narrative of Infinite Crisis is the comparison of pre-Crisis comics to post-Crisis comics. More specifically, their depictions of morality. This narrative has made the story stay compelling all these years later, but has also sparked debate over possible hypocrisy within the story, and if some decisions don't really work for the better. However, before we get into that, we'll have to explain the context of this story, both what leads into Infinite Crisis and the overall state of DC for the past decade or so. In the arc Sacrifice, Diana killed Maxwell Lord since he controlled Superman, and this event becomes public information and is seen as a dark moment in the heroic community. As well as this, it also shows a weak point where a villain is capable of controlling a hero and causing mass destruction. In Identity Crisis, many characters die, with it being a huge betrayal, and we learn of heroes ordering villains to get mind-wiped. As well as this, Batman's brother Eye makes the Omax cause mass destruction. These respectively serve to show that heroes don't always make the right decisions, that not all characters can be trusted, and that heroes' technologies and abilities can be used against them. And also, while these stories, especially Identity Crisis, have many flaws, this doesn't really impact the story of Infinite Crisis itself for me, though knowing what happened is important to the story and its themes. As well as this, in the overall time frame of the post-Crisis universe, we have events like the tragic death of Superman, where DC's original hero, their bastion of hope, falls while taking out the monster Doomsday. This tone was shown in other events, like Nightfall, where Bane breaks Batman's back, or the event Zero Hour, a Crisis event where Hal Jordan goes crazy due to the destruction of Coast City, and later revealed to be the emotional entity Parallax taking him over, and ends up destroying creation while trying to rebuild it in his own image. With this, many readers at the time were disappointed in DC's continuity, seeing the modern era as too violent and too dark compared to DC's supposed better days in the Golden and Silver Ages. In direct response to this story does show some of that side, giving a case for the pre-Crisis era being better than the post-Crisis era. For example, we get to see a great moment from the Golden Age Superman, when he shows that he's willing to even split his knuckles to do what's needed when shattering the dimensional walls. He also states that he sees himself, Superboy Prime, and Alexander Luthor as a better trio than the current DC Trinity. Even Batman, a character from the post-Crisis universe, admits that there are clear issues with this world, with Superboy Prime feeling like he was forced to change to match the tone of this universe, with him ending up worse for wear. This is also shown with the heroes infighting. For example, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are constantly arguing with each other in the first issue, mainly due to the events surrounding Maxwell Lord mentioned earlier, with Batman saying that even though people still look up to Superman, the last time that he really inspired anyone was when he died. The implication here is that Superman's death was something that really moved people, showing that this world is a darker world where someone giving up their life is what's needed to inspire, rather than the more simplistic and easier heroism of the pre-Crisis era. The sacrifices in post-Crisis can also be seen as closely reflecting the sacrifices from the pre-Crisis heroes in Crisis on Infinite Earths, the turning point for DC inspiring this event. Infinite Crisis, of course, also focuses on giving a defense to the post-Crisis continuity. However, they also show that not everyone from the pre-Crisis days are so against the current era. For example, the post-Crisis Superboy deciding to not do anything about the current state of the world is seen as wrong by the majority, though the Golden Age Lois defends him, saying that he has gone through a lot and that she does believe that he will step forward, which he does do later while fighting Superboy Prime, saving the world in the process, though sacrificing himself. Power Girl is shown as being conflicted about whether or not this is the right thing to do after talking to Earth 2 Superman and Alexander Luthor. Golden Age Superman also tries to recruit the post-crisis Batman, acknowledging that he has also made mistakes himself, and sees that Batman has made mistakes, but believes that he can still help and gives him another chance. However, at this point, Bruce points out the clear issue in his plan, with the replacement of worlds basically causing universe-wide death, even for those like Dick, who are perfectly fine people. After deliberation, Power Girl suggests a way for everyone to work together, showing neither are truly wrong but that they just need understanding. And Lois sees that they should just let the other universes be. A lot of the events depicted for issues in the post-crisis continuity are things that characters learn from. For example, there is an image of Superman killing the Pocket Universe Kryptonians, something that he has learned from. This shows that much of what the Earth 2 cast has made their opinions on the post-crisis people is off of out-of-context moments, similar to how many readers were also taking these moments out of context to lambast current issues and act like the darkness was just there for the sake of darkness, rather than it being used to develop characters and show they are against these things. Yeah, a lot of the development that the pre-crisis heroes have an issue with are just a comparison to fans who whine about changes when they're just natural progression. Eventually, the Golden Age Superman realizes that many of Earth's heroes are just as good and strong as the pre-crisis versions, and Batman suggests the only reason the Earth 2 Superman is like this simply because Lois is dying and he's trying to figure out a way to get around it. Eventually, he does come to his senses and figures out that he was duped by Alex, and decides to work together with the post-crisis heroes. With Golden Age Superman realizing he's been tricked, he sees this as a mistake it is, with Diana comparing it to her own mistake from Sacrifice. And this paints another comparison between them, showing that despite different continuities, these heroes are similar in many regards, and the mistakes are something that could apply to both and are things they simply learn from. We also get the introduction of the new Blue Beetle, which can be used to show the hope needed for a new hero, and therefore putting a lot of trust into him, showing that they are overcoming the mistrust that Golden Age Superman previously pointed out. Another thing this event does is that it also points out some of the problems the pre-crisis characters had. For example, as mentioned before, Clark sees Bruce as mistrusting, and that was what led to where they're at now. However, the Earth 2 Clark has this exact same mistrust for the heroes from the post-crisis world. Alexander Luthor shows he has no problem with killing someone who's evil, despite Diana being criticized for the exact same thing. And we also see that he is willing to completely backstab and trick people, with Power Girl and Superman being examples. Superboy Prime goes through a lot of change during this event, with him accidentally killing while fighting the Teen Titans, though he has remorse, similar to what we see from heroes like Batman over the OMAC situation. This comes to be a focal point during the Golden Age Superman versus post-crisis Superman battle, where it's pointed out that Earth 2 never could have been a perfect Earth because a perfect Earth does not need a Superman. The current Superboy and Bart Allen both point out Superboy Prime's blatant hypocrisy, with the fact that he has become a murderer over time. While Superboy Prime blames this universe, he still judges the heroes affected by the same setting. Though, unlike many of the problems in the post-crisis universe, at this point he doesn't seem to have much regret. While I have mostly stuck to the main series of Infinite Crisis, rather than addressing the tie-in issues, since I'm a huge Superman fan, and I do think that these tie-ins do a specifically great job at showcasing the themes of Infinite Crisis, I will be looking into the This Is Your Life tie-ins. Starting off, in this run, while the two are fighting, we get to see events that we did not see in Infinite Crisis proper. While they are fighting, each blow shatters space and time, causing them to see some of each other's lives and live them out in their own way. In these situations, we see the Golden Age Superman decide to not hold back against evil and deal with them as such, killing enemies and joining up with characters like the Elite after his methods are questioned by the Justice League. Ultimately, the Golden Age Superman ends up seeing himself above the law and terrifies the New Earth. The post-crisis Superman, while in the Golden Age's shoes, makes other mistakes. After learning to deal with things so history will never be repeated, he ends up developing Earth 2 into a peaceful, stagnant paradise, feeling he should simply follow the law and handle any problem that comes his way, with him thinking no one will question him. However, when the Anti-Monitor shows up, he feels fear and ends up losing. Despite everything he had achieved, he had simply developed a world with less experience in fighting back and less people able to help. The Golden Age Superman failed in post-crisis Superman's place because his method only ended up leading to tons of corruption, while the post-crisis Superman ended up making a grave mistake in his viewpoint as well. They basically see things as each other's worlds being inevitably doomed, Earth 2 Superman sees PostCrisis as too self-loathing and conflicted, while PostCrisis sees Earth 2 as too simple and empty, with both seeing the other as ignorant. This shows that despite both of their hopes for doing the right thing, it's easy to go down the wrong path and also easy to judge others off situations you haven't experienced firsthand. PostCrisis Superman ended up being like how he sees Golden Age, while the Golden Age Superman ended up being like how he sees PostCrisis. Now, moving back to the main series of the event, Wonder Woman's point in the narrative is sort of weird. While I do like how she's used to compare with the mistakes others have made and show growth that can be achieved, the way she goes about it, of having to find a way to be more human and finding out who she is, doesn't really make too much sense. It's pretty much like they're portraying it as she can't relate to humans and just looks at them in a way where there's something for her to save and is more focused on being a princess and a goddess, which makes very little sense for a character who has literally lived among humans and has even worked a fast food job before. So acting like she cannot relate to normal people is just such backwards logic for everything the character's done, where it's really hard to take any criticism against her seriously. Had they just stuck to the idea of using her as a plot point for a character making a bad mistake and then learning from it, I think I wouldn't be anywhere near as annoyed as I am with how it's portrayed as her not being able to relate to humans. Though, honestly, even the whole thing with her killing Max Lord is sort of weird with the fact that she is one of the biggest pacifists in DC, though that's not really this event's fault but rather Sacrifice, which is kind of a dogshit event. Another thing I want to point out is that at a point, Batman seems to have tried shooting Alexander Luthor, as is implied by the sound effect when he has the gun pointed at his head, meaning he would have tried to kill him, but there wasn't a bullet. This is obviously very weird considering the point of the event being that these heroes are not the murderers they've been portrayed to be, and later printings of this did remove the sound effect, now just implying that Batman simply considered it and decided not to when Diana arrived. Though I'm not sure which version is DC's current view, since recent printings have still included the sound effect, though I'll go with Batman not actually pulling the trigger, since it flows much better narratively. The event wraps up with the two Supermen taking on Superboy Prime and ultimately losing the Golden Age Superman in the process, but with Prime losing and Superman pointing out what it really takes to be Superman. Rather than any sort of logo or how powerful you are, it's based on what you do, the actions you take, and trying to make the best decisions possible. Slightly afterwards, Alexander Luthor gets away, but encounters the Joker and Lex Luthor, who show him what this world's actual villains are like, and definitely help him understand that maybe there is a bit of a clearer distinction between good and evil than he previously thought. With this being said, there are still a few more things I should bring up in terms of problems people have with the run. For example, one of my commenters brought this up. The Golden Age Superman hasn't exactly always been the best person. For example, in Action Comics number 8, Superman decides to threaten some delinquent kids with dropping them off a building to their death, and decides that it's the problem of the neighborhood they live in, so he destroys that neighborhood, counting on the government replacing it with cheap rental apartments. Not exactly his proudest moment, I'd imagine. Or, I don't know, how about the time in Action Comics number 12, where Superman decides that because drivers are too irresponsible and therefore there should be something put in place to prevent deaths and other sorts of car accidents. This is of course a pretty good idea, but he goes about it by destroying a bunch of cars, destroying a car factory, and then after completely destroying that, decides to kidnap the mayor to show him the victims of reckless driving. This actually does end up leading to better driving laws, but both of these examples show that, yeah, he might have had a lot of good intentions, but his methods weren't exactly unquestionable by any means. Though, considering how early a lot of these moments are in his run, I think it is fair to say that he ended up evolving from these mistakes he made, but at the same time, it does serve to show the point of Infinite Crisis that a lot of the pre-Crisis cast is judging heroes off of things they can evolve from, as Superman did with these actions. However, considering that, again, he was giving Batman a chance and did seem rather conflicted after his conversation with Bruce, I do think this is overall still pretty consistent with the tone of his character, though had the Silver Age Superman not died in Crisis on Infinite Earths, making him available for use in this series, he probably would have worked better as this symbol of someone who did very little wrong. But for what they could do, I think Golden Age Superman still managed to fit pretty well. Another criticism is that Infinite Crisis is overly violent and, if anything, proving the point of the pre-Crisis characters. However, I think this is misunderstanding the idea of a tragedy that is being presented here. The character deaths are not used for the sake of glorifying it. If anything, Golden Age Superman's death, for example, is a moment of him finally getting peace and getting a true happy ending with Lois, as implied by what we see of him and Lois in ethereal forms in the sky, rather than the fake paradise from heaven. As well as this, Alexander Luthor's demise is used to show the actual actual difference between good and evil in this world, and Prime's murder of the Teen Titans is the start of a much bigger arc with a whole beginning, middle, and end, and a character learning from their mistakes, and eventually redeeming themselves too. On top of this, I don't like the idea that, oh, these characters were supposed to live forever in heaven and have this perfect life, when really, it's not like we would see any of these characters anyways had they just stayed there, and they'd essentially just exist in this forever stagnant world with no stories to be told and nothing to do but sit there and watch. Not exactly the most compelling idea for these big time heroes. All in all, I think Infinite Crisis is an amazing event. I love how it develops a plot, showing that all of these characters have depth to them. And while there is definitely a lack of understanding, each heroes seem to have a purpose for what they're doing, and their disagreements with the others have basis to them. The analogy of this plot to comic readers is also very fitting, showing that had many of the readers really looked into the context to the events in the New Earth continuity, it would make more sense to show what the actual narrative of those events were, rather than it being this ultra-violent sort of deconstruction of its world's greatest superheroes. While there's not too much time left to talk about other aspects like the art being incredible, both the cover art or the art in the issues itself, or the fact that it is a genuine blockbuster of a comic with many great action scenes, specifically the ones with Superboy versus Superboy Prime, the ending one, the battle between the two Supermen, and many of the battles in space being highlights, etc. If you have not read Infinite Crisis, I would highly recommend it to anyone who's a fan of DC in general. Now, that's pretty much my opinion on the event as a whole. It's probably a 9 or so for me, maybe slightly higher, though I do have some gripes with it as mentioned before. If you guys have read the event, I'd be really interested in hearing your opinions in the comments below. This video was a bit of a mess to come out, to be honest. Over the last 3 weeks, I've been pretty busy. I've had a lot of stuff on my hands, and getting this video out was something I had to do in pieces here and there, and where I lost my train of thought between days, so hopefully it still came together in a cohesive way. That's pretty much all for this video. Thank you guys for the support. See y'all next time. Peace.